Hi, and welcome to Chapter 3. In Chapter 3, we're going to start using our classes. So, as I've told you before, this is an object-oriented language. Everything is class-based. But most of the time so far, you've just been writing procedural code inside of a class. We're going to start actually using our classes. So we're going to explain how to do your methods, how to make your classes, and how to use those objects with each other. Let's get started. First of all, when you write your methods, you can choose to add your methods either before or after your main method if you're writing a procedural function or a procedural class. So in this example where the highlights are, you can either put methods above or below. However, you are probably going to pick one or the other. So you're either going to have your first method be your main or your last method will be your main. You don't really want your main in the middle of all of your random methods. So you want to try to think, how do you want to see your code? Do you want your main method at the top and then all the rest of the helper functions and methods are underneath it? Or do you want to have all the helper methods declared first and then have your main at the bottom? That's going to be a personal choice for you. When we talk about abstraction, abstraction is simply the act of using a method to contain a series of statements. As you've already seen in your assignments, sometimes you're duplicating code and you're duplicating the same code over and over again. That's frustrating. You really don't want to have duplication of code. So if I could pull that method out in an abstract sense and then be able to just call that method, I don't have to duplicate my code. So abstraction is what we call the using methods to contain series of statements that you're going to run multiple times. You can make a method that only is called once, and that's okay. There's no problem with that. Sometimes that's just used to clean up your code and to make it more easy to read. Each class can contain multiple methods. However, you cannot declare methods inside of other methods. You can declare methods inside of a class, and that's fine, but you cannot declare a method inside of another method in Java. Remember, other languages, always different story. So in Java specifically, methods are never inside of another method. So your method is usually pretty contained. What I tend to do is if I'm looking at any piece of code and it's filling up more than 2/3, maybe a half of the screen, I may pull it out into a method just to clean up my code. If I have 2 screens worth of code, it's going to be harder for me to visualize what does that code do. And anything inside that code might be able to be easier understood if you pull it out into a method. In the example that's listed here with the class first, we have a display address method. Now all that does is print out 3 print statements to say what the address is. But if I want to put my address in multiple locations, rather than having it inside of my main, by having a method called display address, I can just put display address anytime I want the address to show up, and I don't have to worry about it. I can make sure that if I had to change the street address or change the name of the company or the zip code or something like that, I only have to change it in one place. One of the best parts about the abstraction of pulling out methods is that when you have to fix something, when you have to change something, it's in one location, and it's pretty easy to find in that location. Building methods in Java. Okay, so you're always going to have a method header, and you are always going to have the method body. So the header is everything before the curly braces, and the body is everything contained in the curly braces. So the header has a access specifier, which is public and static. We'll talk about those in just a second. A return type, which can be void if there is no return type. We're going to go through each of these a little bit more in the next couple of slides. Parentheses. You have to include parentheses even if there is no parameters being passed. So with or without parentheses, you're always going to have parentheses. So your access specifiers, your return type, your identifier, what is the name of the method, and parentheses. Inside of the curly braces is going to be your statements that create your method. One of the functioning projects that I do, one of the ways that I code is I will start with my algorithm. As I've said, I like to write down my algorithm before I start. But what I'll do is I will actually get my hands on the keyboard and I will start declaring method names and then just creating what we call stub functions. If it has to return something, I can return void, I can return false or true, or I can return a 0 or something like that. But essentially, I'm creating the function or the method, and I'm just putting in some comments. What does this method do? What does this method do? There's no actual code going on yet, but because I have the methods in there, I can declare those and I can use them calling those methods inside of my main code because they're already declared, even though they don't actually do anything. Then I know I just have to go back and finish filling them out. So that's kind of a way that you can do this, where you create your method headers and then your method body is just some stub form, either nothing or a return value of none or false or something like that. So this is your basic method construction. So let's look more at that header. So as I said, the header has 4 things: the access specifiers, the return type, the name, and the parentheses. Your access specifiers are going to determine who or what can see it and use it. So we have public, private, protected, or nothing, empty, which is just generic for anything within its package. Public means that this method can be seen by anybody who can see this class. So if I have my class goober and I have a method in there that is foo, and I make it public, anybody who can see my class, anybody who can access that file, can see that method and can use it. Private is only available inside of my class. So private methods would be like helper functions that you're going to be using to make your main functions run. You don't really need the outside world to know about those private functions, because you're just going to do that black box programming where the outside user can just see that you have a method and can access your public methods, but it can't see any of your private ones. Protected and empty are both related to the packaging, which is if you have a package collection for your group of code. So if you have 5 classes that all work together and they are inside of a package, sometimes inside of a folder, then any of those can see each other, but people outside of, or functions, classes outside of that package cannot see them. So those are protected. They're available to anybody inside the package, but not outside of it. Then we have static versus non-static, which is just nothing. You just don't put the word static there. You don't use the word empty. It's just, there's nothing there. What static means when it comes to a method access specifier says whether or not you need an instantiated object to reference this method. You're going to understand this a little bit more as we get into classes. So we're going to do classes with this chapter. If I create a class, again, goober, my generic class, my test class, whatever it's called, and it doesn't really have any class attributes and it's not really instantiated as a new class object, a new test object, a new goober object, but I still want to use the methods that are in there. Those would be static methods that do not require you to instantiate an object to call it. If I need an object to call it, so if I'm making an animal class and then the animal has attributes with it, how many legs it has, something like that, and I need that actual object to get the value of this method, how many legs does my animal have, then you just leave that static part empty. So it's non-static or empty. You just don't put something there. So you can say public, then return type, then the name, then the parentheses without using the word static. Return types, remember everything in Java is very type specific. It's strongly typed. So does it return something? You can use the word void if it does not return a value. Remember how I said at the beginning, functions versus methods versus procedures sometimes can be whether they return a value or just do something. Void is the return type of something that doesn't return a value. So if I was to add 2 numbers, say I make a function called add numbers and I take an x and y parameter, I need the result of that. I need to return a number. So I would say my return value is an integer and I'm going to add 2 integers or something along those lines. So my return type would be whatever data type it is. Remember, your data type can be either a primitive type, int, float, boolean, string, or int, boot, boolean, character, or it can be a reference type like a string or an individual object. So you can have your return type be an object. That's fine. So I can say I'm going to return a string or I'm going to return a animal class object. Otherwise, if it does not return anything, if it just does something, maybe sets a value, it doesn't have to return anything, then your return value is a void. Obviously, methods have to have a name. We usually name these after verbs. Because they're doing something. It's an action. I always think of my methods as an action. What is the action that it is performing? Am I setting something? Am I getting something? Am I changing something? What is the verb that goes along with it? And by naming your methods after verbs, it makes it very easy for you to be able to visualize when you see that action, what is it that it's about to do? Sometimes those can be a Boolean value like has legs, and it can be returning true or false. Does it have any legs? And that's okay because it's still kind of that verb concept. It wants to ask a question. And then, of course, parentheses. You have to include parentheses even if there are no parameters. So if you have parameters, you need to put parameters in there, and those parameters are going to be able to have the data type and a variable name that they're going to be able to be used inside the method. So this is your basics of method headers. We're going to be working on some code in just a second. So you are going to stop for just a second and you are going to go write your static class method. So just a basic method called display info, and you're going to attach it to a class called Paradise Info. We're going to be using Paradise Info through this entire chapter. So you want to go ahead and start now. Then you will be building a second file. This is your test info file. This is the procedural file that has a main. What you will find when you do this, and this is obviously written in the book, and then I'm going to show you the code, is that you're going to be making your class called Paradise Info, and there's no main function in it. And that's okay, because that's intentional. You're going to be calling a method called display info from inside of it, but you're not going to be having a main that goes along with your Paradise Info. So let's go see what that code looks like. There are 6 different You Do It projects for chapter 3 that we're going to be going over, and they're going to be interspersed in the middle of the video. The first one that we're going to do is on page 118, and it is a static method with no arguments and no return values. So I'm going to go ahead and create under my chapter 3 in classes exercises. I'm going to create a new file. And in this case, I'm going to call it Paradise Info. .java. Remember, with the Java file, you always end it with a .java. Depending on what you did for your Java extensions, it may put in the class information for you, which is great because it just makes sure that you have it in there. And it is the same name. Remember, your class name has to always be the same name as the file name. And in this case, it's public. So we're going to add our public class, Paradise Info. Cool. You may notice that it's underlined here in yellow. That just says it's not a class path. And we can fix that. It's not going to show class path errors in this situation because I don't have them turned on. When I run this, it may give me some errors as I go along. So I can add to my class path by doing quick fix and changing those. I'm not going to for this purposes, but if it's an orange or a yellow underline, you don't have to worry as much about it. It just means that there's a little warning, red is bad. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and add in our main function or our main method. So remember, it's a public static void, and it's always called main, and it takes a string array named args, and then open and close curly braces. You are going to find your feeling on curly braces if you want to have them down on new lines like this, or if you want to have your curly brace up. It's totally a personal preference. Inside this, we are going to call display info. We haven't written display info, so it's up to you how you want to do it. One of the things that I like to do whenever I'm writing new code is to do some sort of comment at the top that just says, this is Paradise Info .java, and this is the You Do It on page 118, and by Cheryl. Sometimes I like to add the date just so that I can keep track of what days I'm doing things. When was the last time it was updated, things like that. I might also put in a description like static method for printing header info. It's really nice to add this at the top of all of your pages, just because then you can just glance at the top of your page and find out what the class was supposed to do. Inside here, I'm going to call the display info. Now, I haven't written it yet, so it should give me an error at some point and say, hey, display info doesn't exist yet. That's okay, we're going to write it now. So this is going to be a static void, and it's going to be called display info. It kind of knew, you can see with that IntelliSense that it knew that's where I was going with this. Remember, public means it's available. Static means that you do not need to have an instance of Paradise Info to be able to call it. You can call Paradise Info dot display info. In this case, our main function is going to do it for us, so it's going to be fine. But we're going to have display info here as a public static method. In our public static method, we are going to do our system out println and our text. So I've got my two little statements here, and if I called my paradise info, it would print these out. So right now, as I hit run, it will run the main function. This is that class path thing I was telling you about. I'm just going to click add to class path, and what that's going to do is add the class path to the project so that it can run from here and it knows how to do that. And as you can see, I still have it as the pop-up, the console. Paradise Day Spa wants to pamper you. We will make you look good in 2 lines, and then press any key to continue, and it'll go away. So that's your basic static method, but the point of this lesson was actually to have this called from another class. So we have our Paradise Info here, which is fine. And we're going to go ahead and build a new class. This one is going to be our test class. So we are going to call it testinfo.java. And this is going to be our test class. Again, it's got to be called public class test info, and inside it is a public static void main with a string args. And inside of our main for test info, we are going to just write our system out println calling a method from another class, just so you can see what we're about to do. Then we are going to call Paradise Info, it's going to find it, and we are going to call the display info method. So what we're going to do with this class is we're actually calling the method from the other file. So this method over here, we're going to call it from here. So when I run this, it's going to say calling a method from another class. Paradise Day Spa wants to pamper you. We want to make you look good because that was the class that we needed over there. So hopefully that helped you to understand how the calling a static method from another class works. In this case, we just called the class name, dot, and the method name. Those are static methods. Remember, static meaning that you do not need to have an instance of a Paradise Info object. You can just call it straight from the class. Hopefully that helped you to understand a little bit more about how your static methods are going to be created. As I've said, we're going to use what's called black box programming, which is the concept of hiding your implementation or implementation hiding. Remember how I said object-oriented uses encapsulation to encapsulate or to put inside of a capsule all of the interior method details. All you need to know is that the method takes these parameters and it returns this value. You don't need to know how it does anything on the inside. All you need to know is parameters in, return value out, and that should be fine. When we pass parameters, you have to include the data type of the parameter and then a variable name for that parameter. So in this case, my print age method has a parameter of what is my age. So int my age. And then it's going to print out using the system out, what is your age? How old are you? Remember when we talked about scope? Scope, again, is really important. The variable my age only exists within the scope of this method. It does not exist outside of it. So you cannot have a secondary method that uses my age because it was a parameter in this method. If you have a my age variable outside, that's not the same variable. The variable that is used inside this method is the one that is passed into it. And if you didn't pass anything into it, then it doesn't have anything. Then it's a void and it comes back as nothing. Even if you have a my age variable outside of it. So trying to remember that scope, really important. You can obviously have multiple parameters. You don't have to have just one. And it's pretty easy. You just do data type and variable name, comma, data type, variable name. And those work fine. So if I wanted to calculate my gross income, I would say how many hours and what is my rate and pass those in, then do the calculations in the printout from inside there. Technically, there are 2 types of parameters, and we call them actual parameters and formal parameters. So an actual parameter is the arguments that are actually in the method call. So in this case, the string name or the int age. These are, actual parameters are in the method call. So when you, actual parameters are inside of the method call. So when I call the function print hello and I'm passing things in, so I'm saying name, comma, my age, whatever it happens to be in my hello method, the ones inside the method call are the actual parameters. Formal parameters are the ones that are in the declaration. So in this example here with the print hello, the string name and the int age that are highlighted, those are formal parameters. They are the ones that are actually being used inside of your declaration for your method. Most of the time, people understand those as the same thing. You just call them parameters and you move on with your life. But for the purposes of understanding terminology, I need you to understand actual are the ones that you're using inside the method call, and formal are the ones in the method declaration. So when you declare your method, when you create it, when you make the method like this with the public static void, that's your method declaration. You've declared it. If you're using it in your code elsewhere, that's where actual parameters are going. And as I said, there is a return type. So your return type, when you have one, uses the keyword return. So in this example here with the calculate gross, I have a double as my return type. And so I have to make sure that the thing that is returned is also a double. So return gross. In the predict raise, it's also a double, and the new amount is also a double, and you're fine. Those have to be the same data type. It's very important. You can't return an int when it's supposed to be a double. It will get confused. The return statement has to be the last line in your code. You have to put it as the last line. If you say return, nothing after it is going to get called. So you can't say return new amount and then change something else because it's called unreachable code. It's not going to happen, dead code. It's going to stop at the return and stop calling anything at that point. You can, as we'll find out later on when we get into conditionals, do like an if statement. If this, then go ahead and return. Otherwise, go do all this other stuff. As long as the return is still the last statement in your flow, you should be okay. But make sure that you understand that if you put a return and you put code after the return, it's not going to happen directly. One of the really fun things is being able to chain your method calls. So if I have two methods, the examples I have here are add 10 and times 2, I can take the return value from one and pass it as a parameter to the second. So you can see in the example where I've set an old value, my first value is the result of add 10. My second value is the result of times 2. Okay, fine. But I can do my third value, which is times 2, to the value of whatever is returned from add 10. So instead of having to declare two variables and set them as first and second value, I can just say times 2 add 10 old value, and it doesn't need those other two values in there. You can do those obviously either direction, whichever way it works, as long as your return value from your interior method is the right parameter value for your exterior method. And you can do multiple levels of chaining. You could do 3, 4, 5 methods all chained, and that's fine. You can totally do that. It makes things really nice when you start cleaning up your code and making it easier to understand. At this point, you're going to stop for a second and go play with the Paradise Day Spa again. You're going to make a method that's going to take two parameters, the compute discount info, and it's going to allow you to put in some information from your user. So you're going to have to use your scanner class to get some from your user, and then pass those into a method that is going to print out the result. Let's go look at that code. So in this project, we're actually going to create a copy of Paradise Info and call it Paradise Info 2. You can come over here and you can click copy, and then you can say paste, and it'll pop up there and call it copy, and then you can rename it Paradise Info 2, or you could rename it whatever. Just make sure that when you do Paradise Info 2 that your class name up over here is also Paradise Info 2. And I'll change a couple of these. Static method, and this is going to be a compute discount info, which is going to take some parameters. I'm going to go ahead and import my scanner class. Remember, our scanner class is the one that gets user input. And as you can see, I just typed in scanner. It's yellow right now and grayed out because I haven't used it yet. It does that to let you know that you've created something, but you haven't used it yet. So we're going to go ahead and have the scanner figure out how much the discount and the price is for our special. So we're going to keep our display info here, but inside of our main. So we're going to add some declarations to our main that is going to say what is the cutoff price for the discount and what is the discount rate. So we're going to have a couple of variables. So a double that's price and discount and savings. Okay, again, they're yellow because they haven't been used yet. As you can see down in my problems, I have those turned on just to let me know what's going on. And you can see it just says they haven't been used yet. That's fine. We are also going to create a scanner object. I'm going to call it in. I know the book calls it keyboard. I don't care. New scanner, and we're going to use system, capital S, system in as the input to our scanner class. Okay. Again, still haven't used it yet. Let's go use it. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to print, enter the cutoff price for the discount. So system out, println. Actually, I'm just going to do a print because I'm going to have them write it on the same line. Enter cutoff discount. You'll find that I really like those little arrows because it adds a little bit of a space and it lets the user know that that's where they're supposed to write their answer. And then we're going to set our price value equal to keyboard input next double. Then we're going to do system out print ln or print enter discount rate as a whole number. And we're going to set our discount equal to in next double. And finally, we are going to do figuring out what our savings is. So I'm going to set savings equal to compute discount info, which is going to pass both the price and the discount into them. At this point, it doesn't know what the compute discount info is, which is fine. We're about to build it. Then we're going to say system out print ln special this week on any service over whatever our price was. So whatever double we put in there. And then we're going to say discount of 10%, whatever it was, 15%, whatever it is that you entered. And then finally, we're going to take the output from our compute discount info, our savings, and print that out. System out, print ln. Okay. If I stopped here, you can see in your problems that there's a problem. We haven't written our function yet. You can see here, because it's underlined. You can see down here in your problems. You can see over here in the fact that it says that there's one error. Don't ever turn in code that has errors in it. You should be able to fix them all. Or call me and ask me how to fix the problem, and we can work through that. Now we're going to go ahead and build our compute discount info to get rid of those errors. So we're going to have a public static. In this case, it's going to return a double. Compute discount info. We are going to pass it a double, that's the price, and a double, that is the discount rate. You'll notice, yes, price is the same, but discount rate is different, and that's okay. The reason it's upset right now is because, in is never closed. The reason it's upset now is because it doesn't return a value, and you can see this method must return a type of double. We haven't returned anything yet, so it's mad at me still, and that's okay. We are going to say double savings, which is going to be the value that we're going to end up returning, and we're going to set savings equal to our price times our discount rate divided by 100, because we want the percentage. Finally, we are going to return our savings. Okay, so that made that happy. You'll notice there is still one error. This input device, the scanner, needs to be closed at the end after we finished getting all the information from our users. So usually I will go down to the last line where input is used, and I will go ahead and put in.close. You can put it at the end, all the way down at the bottom, and that's okay as well. I like to close it as soon as possible, just to make sure it's closed, and that will fix that. So now at this point, I can go ahead and run this. The main will go ahead and ask me, what is the cutoff price for the discount? What is the discount rate as a whole number? It will then close my scanner. It'll go into the function, the method, compute discount info, with the price and the discount rate. So those numbers will pop in there. Calculate it, return it, place it into the savings value, and then print out my 3 results. So I can go ahead and run. We are going to say add $150. What is the discount rate as a whole number? We're going to say 10%. Sorry, let me move my mouse. And it will say special this week on any service over $150. Discount of 10%. That's a savings of at least $15. Okay, so now we're pretty much understanding about methods. Let's get started on classes. So as we've said, classes, generally, I name them nouns. Person, place, thing, or idea. You remember from English class. So when I think of a class, I think of is a relationship. My object is a building, a dog, a computer, a goblin, a wizard, a crossbow. I do a lot of RPGs. So when you think of your class, I could make a class for a goblin, and I could make a class for a wizard, and I could make a class for a crossbow. I could have a fire crossbow, I could have an electrical crossbow, I could have a water, no, not usually a water crossbow. But generally you can have, an XP crossbow that's going to add some extra stuff. Anyway, different types of things that you can create. When you create a class, you are creating that type. So goblin, wizard, crossbow, building, dog, computer. These all work fine. When you instantiate your object, and I'm going to say the word instantiate a lot. Instantiate the object, you are actually creating an object of the given type. So if I make a building, and instantiate a building, I can call it the Empire State Building, and that's now a building. The dog, I can have Lassie or any type of dog. Specifically my computer as opposed to any other computer. When it comes to the goblin, I can have the red goblin or the green goblin or something along those lines, the orange goblin. I can have, Gandalf as a wizard, and that's the instantiated object of the type of wizard. So when I say Gandalf is a wizard, I am saying that the instantiated object, Gandalf, is of type wizard. I can have a string, quote, hello, is a string. String is a class name. It's just one that we use frequently. So when you think of things as classes, they are a noun that would describe what is your object. What is its type? You can have methods inside of your class, and they really obviously should make sense. You can have a wizard that would have a method called cast spell, but the crossbow can't cast a spell, so it'd be kind of silly to have a method called cast spell on your crossbow, but you can put it on your wizard, and that would make sense. Your crossbow could have different methods load, bolt, aim, fire, things like this. Your dog could have methods like come, sit, stay, things like that. Okay, so understanding the visual of what is a class and what is an instantiated object of a class of a given type. The syntax of how to create a class, you've actually already done it. It's a public class and then whatever your class name is. So public class employee. You can make those private. Remember our access specifier to say that it's private or public. The word class and then whatever the class name is, employee, dog, whatever it is for your different types of classes. If it is public, it can be extended and made new classes. Those are subclasses, which we'll talk about when we get into inheritance, which we're not there yet. But you can make other versions of that class. And then you can have data fields inside the class. These are the attributes of the class. So if I said an employee might have an employee number, he might have a job title, he might have his first name or last name. These may be things associated with an employee. These will be attributes or data fields, so variables used within that class. They're global to the class. So once you're in the class and you're making methods, all of those values are available. You can use any of those as long as they're attached to that object. When you declare those, you can declare them as public or private. If they are private, they cannot be seen outside the class. If they're public, they can. You can again make them static, which is they can be used and it's shared among all instances of the class. They're constant variables. So if I had an employee, I might make a static that's company name. Everybody who's an employee of my company is going to have the same company name, but I want to reference that. So when I create my class, I'm going to create a static public variable or private variable called company name, and everybody's going to have the same company name. Those generally cannot be changed. You can set both public or private, public or available, but remember you always need to have the data type. So you would have private, data type, integer string, and you can have other classes here as well for data types, and then whatever its identifier is, so whatever the name is, in this case, employee number. Now that we have created our class, we need to be able to get instance methods, so methods that are related to that class. In this case, we're going to talk about accessors and mutators. Mutate, as in to change, as in to mutate, are things that usually change your value. Accessors are things that access or retrieve or get that value. We also call them getters and setters. So getters and setters are going to be methods that are related to your class that allow you to get your data field or set your data field. We can set those data fields to be private so that outside users can't just randomly set them. They have to go through a getter and a setter, because a lot of times we want to do some validation with our getters and setters. We want to make sure that you're allowed to access the information. We want to make sure that the information is valid. So if I ask for your employee number, I might have a specific file style, like it's going to be A123. And if you put in goober, that's not a good employee number. We can't use that. So we like to use getters and setters when we create our instance attributes to be able to set up the user to be able to get and set those values. These are not static. These are just blank, so they're non-static. And usually we use the word get or set somewhere in them. So in this example, we have employee number, and then we have get employee number and set employee number. It's an understood amongst most programmers what a getter and a setter is. So when they see the method get and they see the method set, they know what those methods are. So it's really important to kind of keep with that consistency. Your setter is going to have a return value void because it doesn't return anything, it just sets the value. And then it's going to have a parameter, which is what value we're setting it to. Your getter is going to have a return value, but is not going to have any parameters because it doesn't need anything coming in. It's just going to return a value. So these are your getters and setters. You are going to find personally that you have a logical order for your classes. This example is just a version of a logical order. You don't have to do it in this version. Generally, this is what I do. So I'm just going to show it to you and then you can choose whatever makes you happy. I always start with my data fields at the top. All of my data fields are at the top and I use them. Generally, I do public and then private in some setting of order. So I know which ones are my private data fields and which ones are my public data fields. Then I do my getters and setters. So if you ever look at my code, you will see here's my data fields, Scroll down a little bit. Here's my getters and setters for all my data fields. Scroll down a little bit. Then we add our public or static class methods. So remember, static without an object declaration, public or with. And then any private class methods. These are going to be my helper functions. They go all the way at the bottom of my code. Because I do this consistently, it's really easy to read my code. Once you read some of my code, you'll understand exactly how the rest of it looks because they always follow this format. You are going to find your personal format. You may choose to put your data fields in a different spot. You may choose to put your getters and setters at the bottom, whatever it is that makes you happy. But come up with an organization and be consistent. Stick to it. The more consistent you are in this class and classes after it, the easier it's going to be for anybody to read your code from now on. You're going to go ahead and start writing some more code with your Paradise Day Spa. You're going to create a spa service class. It's going to have two attributes, the description and the price, and you're going to build getters and setters for each. You're not going to do anything with it right now, but you're going to use it in the next You Do It. So let's go see what that code would look like. In this third You Do It, we are going to be adding a new file for our spa service. So this is going to be our spa service class. Each of the spas, if you can think about how a spa works, has different services that they provide. Facials, manicures, haircuts, massage, whatever it is. So we're going to make a class object called a spa service. And that spa service is going to have two different pieces of information. Its attributes. It is going to have its service description and it's going to have its price. We are going to start out both of these attributes as private attributes, and then we're going to add setters and getters to be able to set them and to get them. So the first thing we do is go ahead and build those. So they are private string service description and a private double, which I can make it lowercase, which is the price. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and build our setters. So public void set service description, and it is going to take a string. When I call set service description, I'm going to be passing in a string in there, and it's going to set the service description equal to service. We're going to do the same thing for our price. Public void set price. And it's going to pass in a double service price. You'll notice that I am not setting the price variable, the parameter name, to the same name as my attribute because I don't want the compiler getting upset. There is a way to do that, and we'll talk about it in just a minute. But for right now, we are going to be setting these two values equal to the parameter that's going to be coming in. So those are our setters, and we're going to add two more that are our getters. So this is going to be a public string because it's going to be returning the value of the service description, get service description. It takes no parameters, and we are going to return service description. For our price, we are going to do a public double because we're returning a double, get price, and we are going to return price. Okay. At this point, we're going to stop, and we're not actually going to do anything except fix any syntax errors that we typed here, because on the next project, you'll see how we're going to use those. Okay, so now that we've explained to you how to make your class, let's talk about how to use it. So we need to be able to declare or instantiate our object. To do that, you simply give it the data type, same way we did with an int I. You would do a student s equals new, and then whatever your class name is again. Student, goober, spa, services, whatever it is. So you're going to use the keyword new and then whatever the data type is with an open and closed parenthesis. Now we do have constructors. We're going to talk about constructors a little bit here, and then I'm going to show you some code with constructors. Constructors is a public method that you are going to be adding to your class. It is always public. It doesn't have a data type return type. It's just a public and then the class name and then any parameters that you want to pass in your constructor. So in this example here, I have student and I'm passing a string ID. Maybe it's the user ID or the student ID or something like that. And then inside that method, I can start declaring what I want those default values to be when you create a new object. You can also have your public and private access of your class data for your fields and your methods when you're inside. So you're going to be creating an instance of your object, and then you're going to be able to be referencing those public methods that exist from that object, or the getters and setters and so on and so forth. So now we're going to do our create SPA services. Okay, this is going to be another test, quote unquote, file, a test class. This is going to have a main function, and in your function, you are going to be creating a SPA service object. You're going to be instantiating a SPA service object, asking the user for the name and the price of each, and then using your setters, and then being able to display from the object itself. Let's go see how this looks. Okay. So we have now created our SPA service class. Now we need to create our create SPA services class to be able to actually build those. So we're going to create a new file again. Create SPA services .java. And this is going to be kind of like a test class. So we are going to have our public static void main string args. And inside of here, we are going to make a string for our service and a double for our price. We're then going to create two objects that are going to be new SPA services. So we're going to make a SPA service, and that's going to be our first service. We're going to make it equal to a new SPA service. Open and close. Okay, same thing for our second SPA service. So SPA service is the data type. SPA service. Second service. I let it catch up to me. It'll go ahead and do the IntelliSense because it knows, because it's a data type here, it knows what type of data it needs to build here. Okay, so those are going to be our two services. Now we're going to go ahead and do some input so that we can get some user info so we can set these pieces of information. So we're going to use our scanner. In equals new scanner. System in. At this point, it's mad at me. Oh, no, it's not. It went ahead and added it for me. Visual Studio Code is kind of nice about that. It'll add classes if it can figure it out. It doesn't always know how to figure it out, but it can do it if it can. So now we're going to say system out, print, enter service. And we are going to let our input fill in service equals in dot next line. This is going to be a string that it's going to be getting there, so that works out fine. We are then going to do our system out print and say enter price. And we are going to do price equals in next double, because we know we're getting a double at this point. Okay, let's go ahead and set our first service information. So our first service dot. This is where we're going to use those getters and setters. In this case, we are going to set the service description equal to service. That's this service right here that we just populated with the user info. We're passing that as a parameter. We're also going to do first service, set price, and we are going to set price. So price. Okay, so that's the variable that we're going to be putting in there. We can now reference that information for our first service. But before we do that, we need to do our second SPA service. So I'm going to actually copy. You have to be careful when you copy and paste. If you're going to copy and paste, you have to be very careful. Enter second service, enter second price. I'm just going to add those in. And these need to be second service, service description, and set price. So I've asked the user to give me the service, the price, the service, the price, and I have created two objects, two instances of the service class. One is called first service, one is called second service. It's going to be mad at me now because in isn't closed, so I'm going to go ahead and close in. And at this point, I can now print out the information that I need. So I can do system out println first service details. And at this point, I can go ahead and do some manipulation with string concatenation, or I could just do first service details, semicolon, and then another system out println. And we can do first service, oops, it's not a string. Okay. First service dot get service description, that will give me the description of the service, plus concatenation with strings. And I can do, say, a colon or something like that, and then a $sign because I'm going to be entering the price. First service get price. Close my parenthesis, semicolon. Okay, so in here, I got my service description, colon, and then my price. Now I need to do the same thing for the second. Again, I can copy and paste as long as you keep everything straight. Second service, then walk through this one. This is second service and second service. Okay, so this is my SPA services create class that has a main function. You noticed when we did our SPA services here, we didn't have a main function. There's no main here because it doesn't do anything. This one's the one that does something by creating new objects and doing something. So I can go ahead and run. It's going to pop up and it's going to say, what is my first service? I'm going to say facial. And I'm going to say that's $15. And second service. Now, this is where that problem comes in. Remember how we talked about getting the double and having that irritating, it doesn't absorb the enter key. When we typed in 15 and we got our next double, it didn't absorb the enter key. So then when it tried to get the second service, it already hit enter and it got confused. So our second service is going to actually be blank. And then we could put in our second service price, which would be 20. And you can see that it doesn't have any details. So we're going to go fix that. After our in next double, we're just going to do in next line, semicolon. Okay, and that's going to allow it to absorb that extra, I'm sorry, that's the wrong place. Yeah, that's the wrong place. I need it up here. Actually, I need it in both places, but in next line. After the first. So this was the first service here. We needed to get that next line. Then the second service. And I could put it here as well, which is fine. Let's go ahead and run that. Make sure that that works. This is why you test, by the way. Let's say manicure, and we'll say it's $30, and we'll say pedicure, and we'll say that's $25. And you can see that it printed out first service details, manicure was $30, second service details was a pedicure, and it was $25 because we populated those classes and we're able to get that information in there. So hopefully you got a kind of understanding of classes and methods. Be careful. There is no semicolon at the end of the method header, just the curly braces open and close. So you don't have to put a semicolon at the end of that. The default constructor is automatically supplied or programmer defined. If you did not make a constructor, there is a default constructor that will be run automatically. Java does it for you. If you want to program define it, you can. So you can go ahead and add in your constructor. I recommend always adding a constructor, always doing a programmer defined, just so you can set default values. It's nice to put default values in that spot so you don't have to just expect the compiler to create it for you and have your variables or your data fields, your attributes, be null or be something you didn't want them to be. So I almost always will do a program defined constructor. Your class methods all have the scope of all of your field values. You can reference any of your field values from inside of your classes. For the purposes of right now, don't reuse your local class variables within your methods. Try to make them two different names, and we'll talk about how to use that in the next chapter. Have a great week. If you have any questions, make sure you can get hold of me or leave a message in the comments, and I will talk to you soon.